Welcome to Theoretically Practical. My name's Brent. If you haven't seen the show before, welcome. I work on all manner of industrial garbage, essentially. I ended up buying this little heavy-duty cutie right here. You might also, if you've watched my previous videos, you might say, hey, Brent, what about your Syncrowave 250? And there's a very good reason why I upgraded. So two things. One, that's a dial arc 250, not a Syncrowave, because I don't know what I'm talking about. So one, this is a Syncrowave, which means things. And two, this has the number 300, which is more than 250, and it's bigger. That's not really why I bought this welder. I almost bought it by accident. So there was an industrial auction near me. They had a lathe I was very interested in, but it went for, you know, what it was worth. So obviously I didn't buy it. But in the same group were two of these Miller Syncrowave 300s, one without the programmer on it, but it had the pulsar built in, and this one that had the pulsar as part of the programmer with a few other extra things. So what we're going to do in this video, though, is we're going to look at what we got with the welder and get it set up and do some welding with it. Just basic stuff. I'm not going to go through all the settings. I've never had a welder with a pulsar before. I've never had a welder with this craziness, but I think there's some good for that because I have a bad habit of snapping my welds on and off. And I've never had AC bounce. I don't know what the ... T is. I haven't had that before. Everything else is pretty much the same as the other welder. You know, you still got the dial. This you have range high and low, and I think on my 250 I have 3 ranges: high, medium, and low. So there's, you know, there's some benefits. They made a version of this with 3 ranges, but this isn't the one, which is fine because I don't weld anything too small. So let's get down to the meat and potatoes. You might say, hey, Brent, how do you accidentally buy a welder at an auction where you're trying to buy a lathe? And well, because this bad boy cost me $367 out the door. You'll notice that the calibration was done in December 12th, 2019. So there was a guy who worked at that facility that was there when I was picking things up. He told me they were welding with this pretty recently. They were closing down the whole facility and getting rid of them. This was used for something related to aerospace. They needed to get it calibrated every 6 months. So this was a well-used machine. There were a couple of things that really drew me to it. If you're ever looking for these machines, one, it came with the TIG torch, the foot pedal, some extra gas hose, which doesn't matter, but it's got the ground clamp. It's got 2 regulators, which is kind of neat. So everything you need to get it going, and it has a, see it a little better, a Coolmate 12 chiller underneath, which is what I really wanted because my old setup is an air-cooled torch. I wanted a water-cooled torch, which means you need a chiller. I'd be lucky to find a chiller like that for $300. So I was already in the green. And one thing I've discussed in previous videos, I prefer a hand control over the foot control, so I can do it at the torch when I'm working around equipment. And my dial arc 250 requires an expensive adapter to put hand controls on, and this one is a standard Miller 5-pin, which is basically a 1K potentiometer and a little micro switch. So I can easily put remote amperage control on this. Now, I'm not going to put something together myself. You need an Amphenol plug to plug it in. You need the wire that's properly shielded, and I can actually get a remote amperage slider that is compatible, that will clip onto my torch perfectly for like $185. And considering that it's just meant to work, it's not worth my time screwing with it for that kind of money. So there's a lot of reasons to upgrade to this. So the downsides of buying a machine this big. So I have skid steer and clamp on forks, so I can move this around. But this machine weighs, without the chiller that has coolant in it, weighs 745 pounds. So you do need to consider that when picking these things up. Whereas, you know, it doesn't have any good hook on the top, so it's kind of a bulky unit to move around. Whereas my dial arc 250 has a hook built into the top. It's low enough. I've used an engine hoist to get that in and out of my trailer and to move it. Whereas this is a whole different kettle of fish. So anyways, you bought your welder at your auction, you know, you're like, all right, I want to go weld with it. I mean, I want to go weld this, so what do we got to do? Well, there's a couple things on this one. One, it's going to need some power, and we're going to actually steal the cord off of the MIG, I think, for the moment. And when you put the power to it, you got to rewire it for the right voltage. Now, this is a single phase machine, so I don't have to worry about any of that 3-phase garbage. I'd say the only negative is that this can pull 120 amps at the full load, which I'll never end up using, but this can pull 120 amps. Now, I only have this on a 60 amp sub panel, so it's going to be 60 amps max. That being said, I've never popped the breaker with my 250 amp TIG welder, and I don't expect that this can be a problem anytime soon. We'll see. So just if you have a machine and it says, oh, you need 300 amps or 200 amps or 100 amps, well, if you need 300 amps, you're using something crazy. But if you need like 100 amps or 70 amps, 50 amps is fine to run one of those machines off of for most people most of the time. And if you pop a breaker, it's not the end of the world. So I would say run what you brung and then see where it goes to. Now, I will say that if you see that heavy gauge wiring up there, I put in very heavy gauge copper wire when I first wired in the outlets for the welder, knowing that if I ever ran into headroom with this, I can upgrade the sub panel. But then I have to put new lines from the house to the sub panel and all that. But I hate to do things twice, so at least that way I only have to do it once. So let's look at what I got here and what I did that was stupid. This is the foot pedal for the welder. It's pretty simple. Again, I said it's the Miller 5-pin connector. If you have a 14-pin Miller, you can just get an adapter to go from the 14 to the 5-pin and vice versa. This is what I mean about an Amphenol plug, though. These are pretty expensive plugs. This is a part number. The insert's a part number. The shell's a part number. And the cord grip is a part number. So if you ever have to order one of these, just make sure you get every single part number on. There'll be 4 or 5 to make up a plug. And this is probably a $40 or $50 plug configuration, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. So that's one of the reasons why I'm not afraid to pay $180 for something with this plug on it that just works with my welder, so I don't have to frick around with it. So for the torch, I got a worldwide brand CX20FX. So I think it's a 250 amp, which is less than the welder capacity, but that's also fine. It's got a flexible head, and it's water cooled. Now, the stupid thing I did is that the day that I picked this up, it was pouring rain, and I didn't want to leave the torch in my bed of my trailer getting beat up by the rain. I did have a tarp over that, and it's fine. But I was like, I look in and I see, oh, it's just 3 plastic hoses, so I cut them, not thinking that this hose has the conductor in it. So basically, how these things work is one of these hoses is for the gas, one is for the coolant to the torch, and one is for the coolant from the torch back to the machine. And the reason why they run the coolant around the wire like this is because this is a really lightweight wire. You think you can't run 250 amps through that. You can if it's water cooled. It's all a function of cooling. So the colder you can keep a piece of copper, the less copper you need to conduct current. Hopefully this is not a big deal to reattach, otherwise I just threw away some money. But I also should see what kind of coolant's in there. I know it hasn't frozen and it's been very cold, and it doesn't smell like ethylene glycol, so we're probably okay with the coolant. The other thing in here is that you have, this is where you adjust your spark for your high frequency start. So we'll definitely blow that out, but it's probably set pretty well. That's a pretty easy thing to set and change, but if you have a high frequency start issue, it's probably in there that you need to adjust. It says adjust for 8 thou clearance, no big deal. There's something about the intensity of it that you can adjust here. I believe for the high frequency start, never had that adjustment before, so I don't know what it does. We'll start with this guy here. And hopefully just pop this right off. I think this is gonna be, yes, this will be reverse thread because it's got the notches in it. That's a common welding thing. So, here we go. So that'll also mean, though, when I put this back together again, I won't be able to put any of these in the wrong position because this has a reverse thread, this has a reverse thread and it's smaller, and this is a regular thread and it's larger. Let's see what this looks like. Hopefully we'll find out that I haven't... yeah, that's what I thought. So... yeah. Should not have cut that. Should not have cut that. Well, I'll figure it out. Just a strange thing I noticed about this welder, because it's got two regulators on the side. And originally I thought that was some sort of a dual gas hookup, but the output of this regulator is cut off and the output of this regulator goes to the machine. So I think what this was is set up so they could run one argon tank to the middle here and then run it out to the machine. So one thing I'll have to do is look at how the heck my other argon tank hooks up. That's a good point. Oh, that one's... I think these things are rebuildable. And anyways, they're Lind brand. This is a much nicer brand of regulator. So, but I might end up just using my cheapo regulator because it's already set up. So, but we got to take this panel off here next because the power goes in there. You wouldn't take off the back panel. And this one's got 6, I don't know, probably 5/16 or 3/8 screws. Well, I gotta say for a, I think this is a 1984 welder, give or take. For a welder that old, it's pretty clean inside. Got some big old capacitors right there. And then this is what you'll need to concern yourself with when you're wiring it up. You'll notice one thing is, you can see they use 3-phase wire to plug it in, probably because that's what they had. But obviously one phase doesn't, or 2 phases don't get used. And we're gonna be wiring this up for 240 volts, which is what this right here tells you. If you look here, it's got 208 and 208 on the outside. I don't know how well you can see that. It's got 480 in the middle, which is what's there. And then if you look, it's the middle to one out says 230 volts, and the middle to one out says 240 volts. So here to here and here to here. And you'll notice, even though there's only one spacer, they use 2 pieces there. So you can easily just take this off and put it on correctly. And that's really all you need to do to rewire the machine. So if you're at the auction house and you want to know if you can run the welder off single phase, you'll look down this label here, and this one says primary. You're not concerned with the secondary necessarily. That just tells you the volts, amps, duty cycle, and this is a 300 amp, 60% duty cycle. So that's pretty damn good. And the primary side, so volts, 200 or 208, 230, 460. Amperes, that'll be your ampere draw. So at 460, it'll draw 48 amps. I'm running it on 230. It's going to pull 96 amps. There are 2 versions of this. One's power factor corrected and one isn't. This one is power factor corrected. That means it only draws 96 amps instead of 130 at the top end. But it also means when it's just on and idling, it draws a shitload more amps because it's running, those big capacitors right there are probably the power factor correction capacitors. And it has to do with if you're a big company, you're running a lot of machines at high amperage. I looked it up, it's not that big of a deal. I wouldn't buy a welder because it had it, or I would not buy a welder because it didn't have it. I didn't know until I just looked at this right now. And then you'll see right here, it says volts, amps, and it says single phase right there, 60 hertz. Kilowatts, 13.8 kilowatts, and kVA is 23.6. None of that matters anyways. But all you really want to see is the volts. See that it says 230, says that it's single phase, 60 hertz, and you'll know you'll be able to do something with it. So this will pull 96 amps at the very top end, which I will probably never hit. So all I got to do is put a new wire on, swap those 2, attach the ground, that's what the green wire is there, and we'll be good. There's another ground on the case. I probably won't hook that up in my environment, but if I was in a industrial facility, I would. That's the basics of getting it before you get it plugged in. So I'm going to swap that cord out, get it plugged in, get everything hooked up, and then we'll set it up to weld. All right, we are wired up, and I believe Thundercats are go. So let me just take a look at this and think about it for a second, but there's not that much to do. Yep, white on white, black on black, or the hots on the hots, and this will plug in there, and we should be golden. I'm not putting the side cover on because I think it's bad luck to put the machine back together before you turn it on the first time. At least it has been for me. So this is the big on-off switch. It does look like a big dual-pole circuit breaker because it's a big dual-pole circuit breaker. I don't know what sound it's supposed to make. Contact. Wow. Nice. So that noise you hear is the coolant pump running. And because I couldn't get good flow through that, what I'm going to do is the coolant comes from the pump to here, comes from here, goes to the torch, comes back to here. So what I'm going to do is loosen up one of these two fittings and hopefully see some coolant squirting out. So I'm going to do that in just a moment here. I gotta go the reverse. Some flow, not as much as I would hope. I'm hoping it'll clear itself out, maybe some crap dried up in it. We'll come back to that if we need to. So this is the torch as received. So I bought the stuff to make it, to put it together. So this is a worldwide torch, and this is a CX20FX. FX is just flex head, so you can bend it around a little bit. This is the worldwide AK4GS accessory kit, 9 and 20 torches, or series 2 torches, which is what this is. So one thing is, I did try this together to make sure it fits so I wouldn't embarrass myself. This came with it, but this is just for if you have short rod or whatever. This did come with 2% serrated, and I use 2% lanthanated TIG rod, not TIG rod, tungsten, because it works for aluminum and steel, and I don't have to switch back and forth, so I like that, so that's what I use. In order to put this on, if you have a tip like this, because this is to go to a gas lens kit, and a gas lens is that mesh instead of a different style of TIG torch, and I've been informed that this is the style I want. I don't know that much about it. I asked the sage old welder at work. He told me. And because he told me, I'm doing what he said. So we put that in. Then comes this little guy. And which size? Well, three bears it. That's too small, that's too big, and that's just right. So we'll put that on there. And this stuff doesn't need to be murdered on tight by any stretch of the imagination. It just needs to be like reasonably tight. So, and try not to bend the hell out of that like I just did. There we go. And then we need the middle one of these guys. Pop that in the hind end. Put the rod through. Man, I need to get my tripod set back up again. It's been a trying few weeks. And by trying, I mean it's just been too damn cold. All right, we'll put that through like that for the moment. Slip on the back cover. Screw it on down. Yep. The one nice thing is you can put these accessories on either order, front or back or whatnot. So just so you know, I'm going to start off with the number 6 cup. And that literally just, it's not threaded or anything. You just slide it on over. There we go. And if you've never done this before, when you grind your electrode, you want your grind lines running along the length of it. If you have spiral ground lines, you'll get a bad corona coming off it. It's not good. So then just stick that with, I don't know, that seems like a good amount of stick out. And we'll just tighten that down. There we go. And we'll put the rest of this somewhere else where I will never be able to find it when I need it again. All right, guys, so you might be thinking, okay, I got a little bit of welding rod here. It's 1/8 inch. It's not the size I would choose, but I don't have any of the 16ths right now, or the 3/32 right now. I got my torch set up. I got a nice point on it. I got all the things on it. It's tightened. It's gas tight. We're happy. We know that the fluid flows. We got the ground on. We got the pedal over there. We're ready to weld. Well, pretty close. So, all right. We are going to actually just use most of the yellow settings on this. So electroslope off. I mean, the first time you use the thing, turn everything off. All right, programmer off. GTA and SMA, that's, I don't know what it stands for. That's TIG, that's stick. That's all you need to know. Leave all that alone. Off, pulsar off. We don't need a pulsar. We don't need pre-flow time. We don't need ... T, which might be post-flow time, or doesn't matter. We don't need that. AC balance, we're gonna max cleaning set to number 3 for DC welding. Well, I don't think this does anything during DC welding, but we're gonna set it number 3. Start current, we're gonna have that off. Crater fill off. High frequency start. If we're doing aluminum, we'd be on continuous. We're gonna be on start, contactor, remote, current, remote. We are gonna set the range to high, and we're gonna set it to about 100 amps max. We'll go with 100 amps max. That feels good. It's usually about where I run this. Polarity straight. That's what you want for this. There's some stick welding applications where you want the polarity minus. AC DC, obviously DC. So this is all ready to go, and we are going to fire her up. You can change all these settings with the machine on. I just have it off because it's frightfully loud. All right, so first time welding with the Miller Syncrowave $300 welder. Take 1. Hopefully the only take that's needed. All right, I don't have enough heat. I'm gonna go turn the heat up more. All right. Wow, that is smooth. That is smooth. All right, take a look at the bead I just laid. It's kind of on top of another bead, but it's right there. First weld with it, the machine feels smoother and the foot pedal response is better. That's a different style of foot pedal on the other machine. The boxes look exactly the same, the metal case, but this is basically like a giant 1K resistor and a micro switch, and that is some other type of enormous resistor and a micro switch. So yeah, smooth. I really do think that's pretty exceptional. So now we've welded with steel though. All right, you're like saying, okay, great. One thing to note, this pedal is 0 to 100% if you're all the way down of whatever you've set this dial with. So this just has high and low range. Some had a mid range. You'd rather want the low than the mid because the low lets you get down to like 2 amps welding to 37 amps, something like that. So that's kind of good. And this is going to be fine for everything I need it for. So whatever you set this to is going to be, this and this is going to be the range of your foot pedal. So just be aware of that. So now we're going to want to try to weld some aluminum. Now, if you had used the serrated tungsten, I don't think you can use that for aluminum. You could use straight tungsten for aluminum, but the thoriated is fine. So the only real big difference you got to do is you got to go high frequency. We're going to pop that over to continuous. We're still going to leave the wave balance on balance because I don't know what that does. We're going to move this up to AC. And actually, since this probably hasn't moved in a while, I'm going to move it a couple times. Kind of wipe the contactors good. We're in a straight range of high, maybe 150 amps. And then I'm going to grab a little piece of aluminum and get set up. Okay, now this is just some scrap something I have. I think it's an old boat fuel tank bit. I've cleaned up this spot right here to weld. Now, the thing to know about aluminum is you see that spot's shiny. I took a file to it to take off the oxide layer. You should have a wire brush that you only use for aluminum welding, which I keep buying and then using for something else because it's convenient, which is the wrong thing to do. You'll contaminate the surface. And actually, every time you stop a bead, it's good. I find it's good practice to brush it afterwards. So we got the machine set up. We're going to get welding, and I'm just going to put a bead on here. And then I might play with a few other settings to see exactly what they do. This is definitely a better welder. Man, it makes me look downright respectable. All right, guys, well, that just about does it for this episode of Theoretically Practical. I did play around with some of the more advanced settings more, and I need to read the manual. I don't know what I'm doing, so I ain't gonna show you guys that. But with just the basic settings set, this machine's welding great. I feel like it welds aluminum better than the Dial Arc 250, but in a future video, I want to do a showdown between this, the Dial Arc 250, and we're even gonna bring in the Miller 300 amp MIG versus my buddy has one of those 200 amp suitcase ESOB, nice $3,000 machines that he bought brand spanking new. So I've always been saying you guys should go out, buy these old transformer machines, buy them at auction, buy them on Marketplace, wherever. They're cheap, they're very reliable, and I think they're the best value for the money. But you tell me what you think, and we'll do a showdown in a few weeks here. So that's really all I got this week. The John Deere skid steer project is still happening. I had to order some parts from Italy. I ordered some parts that weren't what I thought I was ordering, and so now I have to order some parts from Italy. Yeah, once that's all done and ordered, we'll be getting back on that project, which should finish up quick. It's also been dreadfully cold here, and we're about to get over a foot of snow tomorrow. So enjoy yourselves, have a great week, and see you very soon.